Suicide and depression. There's no limit to age or gender. It can strike anybody of any age, and when it does, those that are left will take it personally.
Yeah, it is personal. In my family, even though my sister had mental health issues for quite a long period of her life, a year ago she decided that it was just too much, and by herself just decided to end it, and her body wasn't actually discovered for 3 days. And that's really tough. You know, we knew she had issues, we'd supported her through a whole lot of things, and in the end, coming out the other side, she's, you know, supposedly a lot better, and then it happens. So yeah, it is personal, and it makes me think that if that can happen to us, and we're well experienced with understanding mental illness and understanding how difficult it is, if we didn't see it coming, how does the average person in New Zealand that doesn't have normal contact with that sort of thing, how do you identify these things?
One of our club members, we've got 15 clubs in the region, Cambridge Club, we had a member who committed suicide mid last year. So Kevin took his own life, and that had pretty astronomical effect onwards throughout the members, and then of course for us here in the region. They're really friendly guy, super outgoing, so obviously real shock to get that phone call.
Kevin was someone who was a part of the club, and someone who he was always there, always helping out, always willing to give his time, and had a big smile on his face. So while I haven't been around the club a lot recently, certainly know Kevin and know how loved he was by everybody, and how I guess any club, any community, rugby, netball, young farmers, you do look out for each other, and so you do feel it when you lose someone.
A young guy, 28, decided that it was too much for him, and had young girls, really tragic. And we had club members that saw him the day before, and there was no sign. And so I thought, right, we've got to do something about this. You know, we've got to take ownership of the fact that young people in particular have very little opportunity to understand, identify, and then do something about and feel comfortable and confident to confront suicide. You know, even the word suicide, people don't want to say. So yeah, it's personal from a family point of view, and then from our organisation. We've lost 3 people in the last couple of years, 3 too many, and you know, it's a tragedy that I think can be averted.
For Sam Robinson, it's very personal.
Extremely personal. It doesn't get much closer, to be honest. Yeah.
So what's your story?
Oh, if I had access to my guns, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you. I've been battling depression since I was 17, 10 years. Didn't admit it for about 5 years, and it's been with me ever since.
What did you do, Sam?
Once I started speaking about it, gone to a lot of doctors, I'm on antidepressants, different psychologists, cognitive behaviour therapy, trying everything to try and get rid of it.
And it hangs in there?
Definitely. You think you're getting past it, and it comes back and grabs you and pulls you down even more.
So how do we fix it when people won't talk, but they will hide it?
Sometimes we can just sense that something's not right, and sometimes we don't know what to say, or should we say anything, or should it be someone else's job. But I think it is all of our jobs just to say, hey, you know, not how are you, but how are you really doing, and to just give people opportunity, space. Some people don't like that really direct question, so you know, going for a walk or hopping in the truck and going for a drive, so that you're not often face to face, but you can talk side by side, and sometimes that works really well too. And you're right, asking the question and not being afraid. It's everybody's job to look out for each other. It's what we're here for.
New Zealand Young Farmers has really taken the lead on this. We feel that we cannot hide when something happens, and so we had a couple of incidents last year, and one was a tragic suicide of a father with young children. And the point from that was that we didn't shy away from it. We didn't try and cover it up. We brought it out in the open and said, look, we understand there are issues out in our community. There's a lot of pressure on young people. There always has been, but there's even more today, I think, particularly with university and the way things are going. And I think we are saying, let's be transparent. Let's go to our club meetings and say, hey, we're not going to feel all right all of the time. and it's okay to talk about it. So this Good Yarn Workshop initiative and the work we're putting in is all about protecting our young people, nurturing them and giving them an environment where they can talk and speak freely. And in that room today, I've seen that already with young farmer members, just talking openly about their experiences. And at the end of the day, the reality is over 50% of those people in that room will just, they'll suffer depression at some stage in their life, and it may not be diagnosed.
That's the thing, we just need to make it more open and more acceptable to talk about it. At the minute, someone that's struggling doesn't want to talk, and people sort of ignore the fact, and they need to take it on themselves to notice the signs of people that are struggling, that are closing themselves off, lashing out, acting differently, and ask them if they're all right and keep asking if they're all right rather than just thinking it's not their problem. And yeah, hopefully we can change the societal view that depression's okay to talk about.
And then there's the stigma. If only we could come up with a word that didn't say committed suicide, because that reeks of it being of crime, but it's not. But the stigma is very real.
Well, we find there's a bit of a stigma attached to it, especially in the farming community. There's a bit of a get on with it approach, or man up, or those kind of words attached with it. So becoming a facilitator of this program, one of the things I wanted to get across to people was that it's not a bad thing to be suffering from mental health, and those stigmas are pretty old school. So these days we just need to help people through it and show them support rather than attaching that stigma to it.
My own father committed suicide when I was 5 years old, and I lived in a rural community, and there was a huge stigma around it, so much so that I was kind of labelled as the child that, whose father committed suicide 15 years later. And I can say honestly to this day, that every day I think of him, and it affects the way I am and who I am today. So the after effects of suicide is just tremendous. It doesn't go away. I wonder every day what he would think of me now and who I am and who I've become, and wonder what he would have been like, because he died younger than I am now, and that's quite an eerie thought, really.
And it's so judgmental, and that's something that, and I guess I was as judgmental as the next person until you experience it yourself. You know what? These people don't decide to do it just to annoy other people, or they're not thinking about consequences. They're not thinking what the impact is to people around them. Like this guy I was talking about, a young farmers member, had 2 preschool girls. Now he wasn't thinking, you know what, I'm going to screw their lives up potentially by doing this. So to me, the commit word is a blame word, and we've got to move away from that.
It's bloody terrible, especially when I started as a young bloke, testosterone fueled. The last thing I want to do is be labelled as weak or not right in the head and all sorts, and that sort of crashes you and holds you back from talking about it. It makes it worse. You just chew in your own head and you never get away from it.
There is a huge stigma around depression, and we think we are getting on top of it, but really we're not. When you talk to the rural community, it is inherently inside that community, that stigma. I did not tell anyone I had depression until recently. About 2 years ago, I started speaking out about it and saying, look, I don't care if you know if I had depression, it doesn't change me as a person. And I think people like John Kerwin have made great inroads in that area, and Doug Avery, by speaking out, but we need more people to come forward. We need more people to tell their stories, and some of our young farmer members have been so brave in telling us their stories, and it's helped. Every time someone tells a story, there's 100 people will contact us and say, look, I've had the same thing. I'm so grateful they spoke out. So be brave, share your story, because that's the only way we're going to improve the situation.
Young people have very different pressures to the rest of us.
Well, they're everywhere. They come from every angle, because the world's so massive. You're expected to know what you're going to do. Parents, grandparents, everyone thinks you should know what you want to do from when you're young, and if you don't fit that mould, well, you're quite trapped. It sort of can get into your head and bury you with the pressure. And it's bloody hard for a young person to deal with that pressure, and then it goes back to talking. Can they talk to someone about it, or do they bottle it up? And it can just trap them even more.
everyone has pressures in their life. I don't think it matters how old you are. I do think we're probably much more socially connected, but I think it is different. Like, it's a different type of connectivity, and the fact that it isn't that human relation. You can read a Facebook post and it seems really happy, but we can often, the Instagram effect, where you just see the happy snippets of everyone's life, so you can judge that against actually what's the real life in your life, which is not always so great. But that's life. It's the whole package, and it's learning how to deal with that. And I think that's probably something that we have that's a little bit different in terms of that social media and how that affects us.
I since found out on both sides of my family there is a history of depression, and it was kept under the carpet, as you say. And I myself, I have 3 siblings, and I suffered from depression at an early age, in my early 20s, at a time when I was on top of the world. I think I'd just won a major journalism award. Everything was going well in my life, and my friends would not have known how I was feeling. And I just, I really hit the wall. And actually, I remember one day driving to work at Timaru and thinking, it'd be so peaceful to drive into the river, and it would be all over. And once I realised how serious that was, I did seek help. And it's not something that ever goes away. You have to manage it. I'm now off medication, but I certainly went through some pretty low points, and it wasn't something I felt I could openly share with people. And so now when I see young people really struggling, and a lot of them are struggling through university, and a lot of it comes from bullying at school and times like that, or low points in their life, it really concerns me, because I know I've been there, I understand that, it happened to me at the same age, and I know how hard it can be to open up and talk to people and say, hey, I'm not really feeling all right. And that's a really difficult thing for people to understand, that it's not easy for people to go up to someone and say, look, I'm not really feeling that great, because in New Zealand we have a culture of we just get on with it, that's the good old-fashioned culture, but we have to change that mindset if we are to progress and get these statistics down.
Do we need to get young people to learn to talk again? Because, quite frankly, many of us would suggest that they now rely on text messages and Twitter and that sort of communication rather than one-on-one.
We talk a lot through technology today, and sometimes the feelings thing is hard to talk about. I think we do talk. We just need to be not worried about potentially confronting or a conflicting situation, and that if it is going to be difficult, then we still need to not shy away from it and talk about it.
Social media is disgusting. It's sort of ruined everything, in my opinion, because people don't sit down and go to the pub or have a coffee and have a chat about feelings. Through social media you can't show emotion. No one's going to pick up if you're not feeling well. You can just put an act on and everything's fine. And it's like, even my friends and I, we don't sit down and talk that much. It's usually through Facebook or Messenger or text. It just needs to go back to the old ways. If it wasn't there, maybe we wouldn't have such a predicament we do now, with depression and mental health being so massive.
The downside of social media and the reliance on not needing to talk to people is that people are moving further and further away from being able to ask for help in the traditional sense. And that's why I think the great thing about something like New Zealand Young Farmers that groups people together physically is by default you have to talk. And if you see each other often enough to actually notice that someone, and we know that there's plenty of times where people don't show any symptoms or change of personality and they just don't turn up the next day. But for some people where there are actually visible signs, if you think back in hindsight, is be able to go, you know what, Rob, you're not yourself today. Where's Rob that I know? But we don't say that. So we need to empower young people to go, it's all right to talk like that. I employ a lot of young people in the office, and they don't treat me like I treated my boss when I was young, that whole deference to authority. Young people, one of the things they have got is this skill of just saying it how it is. So I get challenged all the time thinking, could I just get talked to like that? Because it's unusual for me. For young people, actually confronting and being, whatever it is, blah, 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 they're quite happy to do it. So
blatantly honest.
They are blatantly honest, and it's a good thing. So if we can convert that ability to going a step further and going, what's on your mind? Or, you don't seem right, what's going on? Then we're more likely to get a bit more open communication and people actually saying, no, I don't feel right. And then you can go, okay, what are we going to do about it?
I mean, I think that's part of the beauty of Young Farmers, is that we're actually dragging people out of their comfort zone and into real life conversations, as opposed to hiding behind a screen. So I think that that's something that we've lost a little bit over the last couple of years, but I think it's something that we've definitely realised that we need to kind of come back to, is that just one-on-one conversation.
Is Facebook a problem that's stopping people talking, or is it still a channel that when somebody alerts that there's a problem on Facebook, that we stop, listen and act?
I believe so. There's going to be plenty of cases where people cry wolf, and that's unfortunate. But I think where there is cries of help on Facebook, they should be followed up, because it could be one of the ones that actually is for real. I'd rather waste time with people that are, oh no, I didn't mean it, to, yeah, I did mean it and you've caught me, thank you very much. That's a much more powerful story to go and tell your friends about.
One of the major barriers for young people is feeling alone and isolated within a family or within a group. They don't think that we older people will listen, and 99 times out of 100, they probably don't. So how can we, older generation, help?
Well, Rob, you know yourself, you've had, issues with depression. You've been very brave in speaking out about it, and I applaud you on that. I think what I'm hearing from young people is that the older generation don't necessarily understand depression, or have an inability to talk about it with their children. I've heard of some young people who have said their parents still can't get their heads around their children have been diagnosed with depression, and I think that's just the culture they were brought up in, and the fact that you kept your problems to yourself. Farming is a very isolated industry in New Zealand, and because of that, it does inherently leave people to want to bring keep their problems to themselves. And so often we hear of suicides in older farmers who have never spoken out about their feelings, or nobody has ever had any inclination, let alone their partners or their families, that they're suffering. I'm hoping this new generation is going to be different, and by them opening up and being transparent, parents and the older generation can see, hey, it's okay to admit not everything's fine all the time, because nobody's ever happy all the time, are they?
There's a feeling that young people haven't experienced hardship enough to be feeling like this. That's an older person's view. Typically an older person like myself will go, you guys haven't lived yet. What do you know about pressure? What do you know about stress? Work in my life for a day. And that's, again, it's a prejudice. So because there's, and prejudice, we think fly under the radar. They're pretty obvious to the person that you're talking to. So if they feel that older people who are role models, who are peoples of authority, actually aren't approachable because they don't understand, what do? They haven't necessarily got opportunities or skills to actually reach out like you and I might have if we're lucky. We actually might be able to be self-aware enough to go, you know what, I'm not right, I maybe need to ask. A young person certainly doesn't have that ability. And if older people are sort of giving off the impression that, oh, just harden up, or you haven't lived long enough yet to really feel pressure, then there's no solution for them.
Oh, they don't quite understand, especially with these social media things. Like, say if it's from bullying or any other pressure, you can't escape it through social media, and parents don't quite understand it's not just going to school or work and it finishes when you walk out the door, but you're constantly in that world of feeling the pressure, feeling everything against you. And I think they need to realise that there's that change, that you're not just safe in your own home anymore, that feelings are real for young people. Like, they do feel the pressure a lot more than they did back in the day because there are so many options, and it's just taking over.
For the older people, I just want to suggest that you may not think that you don't have a relationship with your children that would stop them talking to you. But do you really think that they would? I'd like to congratulate Young Farmers for their Good Yarn program. That's a step in the right direction. Sadly, it's only a small one at this stage, but I give my full support, and I do hope that their Good Yarn program will reach every young person in New Zealand. It is a serious problem, we all know that, but it's a case of education, it's a case of opening the doors, and it's a case of getting rid of the stigma, because It's no different to a broken leg. That gets healed, mental health gets ignored far too often.